Welcome to the Great Basin seasonal outlook for April through July. Over the last 30 days, we've seen cooler than normal temperatures across the Great Basin and also well below normal precipitation around the periphery of the Great Basin. There have been some storms that have brought some precipitation to eastern Nevada into parts of Utah, which did show some above normal precipitation over the last 30 days. However, since October 1st, the beginning of the water year, still well below normal precipitation across most areas of the Great Basin. The only exceptions are into parts of northwest Nevada, a small part of the Sierra, and into central Idaho. In Nevada, this was largely due to our snowstorms in late January and early February, and across the north, these storms have been tracking across these areas throughout the winter, bringing precipitation predominantly to northern regions. The snowpack is still near normal in the north and still below normal over the southern half of the Great Basin, especially over the Sierra into western Nevada and over parts of Utah. Looking at the soil moisture, however, beneath the snowpack, we still have very dry conditions due to the drought, so still low soil moistures across much of Utah and also into western Nevada and California. The evaporative demand drought index is more of an indication of shorter term drought, and we are seeing those drier conditions over southern areas of the Great Basin that haven't seen as much precipitation or cooler temperatures as areas further north. However, looking at our long-term drought, we still have extreme to exceptional drought across much of southern and eastern Nevada into much of the southern two-thirds of Utah. We did have some relief in the higher terrain with some recent storms moving through. However, these drought conditions are likely to persist or intensify through the next couple of months. Further north and west, we still have drought concerns over parts of northern and western Nevada, however not as severe as areas further south. And then further north, where the storm track was more targeted earlier in the winter, and again throughout the spring, we are only seeing abnormally dry conditions in the north with just some small local areas of drought and areas that have been more in absence of the heavier precipitation. So another way to look at drought is a time series. This takes us from the year 2000 on the left all the way through 2021, so the last 21 years of drought information. And you can clearly see where these more significant longer periods of drought have occurred. They've lasted for several years and seem to come and go every 2 to 3 years. So currently we are in a very significant state of drought, as you can see on the right, and this is just the beginning of a drought period. Looking at how this relates to our fire seasons, here in Nevada, BLM land down in lower levels, which is predominantly driven by a grass crop, we largely see our big years where we burn well above normal acreage in years that we don't have drought. And that's simply because we typically have a lot more fine fuel growth, continuity, and fuel loading during those years. In our more significant longer period droughts, we do not see higher acres burned in BLM land in Nevada, again due to the fact that we don't have those fine fuels to carry the fires. However, in Utah it's a little bit different. This is the same series for Utah, for the state of Utah from 2000 through 2001. And the most significant thing on this map is where we are in drought currently. You can see this extreme to exceptional drought is much more amplified than what we've seen in anything over the last 20 years. Certainly at this time in the season, it's unusual to see those drought conditions so pronounced in Utah. So again, that will be significant going into the fire season. But looking at some of Utah's fire seasons and how they relate to drought, BLM conditions, we're kind of seeing a mixed bag. Certainly in years that we don't have drought, we burn more acres in our BLM land in Utah, again, largely due to that grass component, but we're also seeing similar conditions at the start of a drought period as well, more impressive than we do coming out of a drought. So that's kind of where we are this year. We're coming off of somewhat of a non-drought period into a very significant drought period. However, looking at our higher elevations in Utah, this is what becomes more concerning. With our significant drought conditions, these blue boxes show times where we've seen more of our notable higher elevation fires. And many of these fires are listed here on the bottom by dispatch center. You can also see in southern Nevada, this is when Carpenter 1 fire was, which was in 2013, again in a drought year. So that being said, with most of our larger fires or more notable fires in higher elevations occurring in our significant drought periods, that will definitely be a concern going into this fire season. However, looking at some of our current conditions with ERCs, you can see in the north, ERCs are near normal, so near or even slightly below normal in some areas in the north. And then further south across much of Nevada and Utah, we're seeing ERCs generally above normal, again, due to those drier conditions and the drought conditions. 10-hour fuel moistures with some recent storms that have moved through have increased significantly in the far north, also over parts of northern Utah and over parts of Nevada. Still very dry conditions with our 10-hour fuels in the far south. We're seeing a similar trend in our 100-hour fuel moisture and our 1,000-hour fuel moistures, still very, very healthy fuel moistures in the far north, but again, certainly getting drier as you go further south. Currently, we have no large incidents in the Great Basin. However, in late March, we did see a couple of fires over 1,000 or 2,000 acres in parts of northern Utah due to fires being driven on very windy days. So again, that will be a concern here before green up starts, is if we do have gustier winds after periods of dry weather, we certainly could see fire starts that spread for above 1,000 acres until that green up process really starts. So now that we've looked at past conditions, we'll go ahead to what we're seeing here in the next couple of months. So with La Nina and El Nino, currently we're in a state of La Nina, which is cooler water conditions, but you can see by the trend of the graph, we are expecting some warmer conditions going into the fire season, likely just taking us back into a neutral state, and then possibly a re-emergence of La Nina, or possibly at least some cooling going into the fall months. We'll talk about kind of what this means for our weather as we move further ahead. The 8 to 14 day outlook, taking us from April 8th through the 14th, shows cooler and drier conditions across the Great Basin. We will see cold fronts periodically drop down, bringing us some gusty winds, which again will be a concern before green up starts, but also bringing us some periods of cooler temperatures. Right now, it looks like most shower activity will be on the lighter side, but areas that could see some heavier amounts going through the month of April will be in the far north and possibly even over western areas of the Great Basin. Looking at the outlook for the rest of April, again, very similar conditions. So again, in that area of white around the periphery of the north and western areas of the basin is where some of those storms may bring some heavier precipitation at times. Right now, we're not expecting anything super heavy, but we will continue to watch that. But it looks like still drier conditions will persist over southern areas of the Great Basin throughout the month of April, along with warmer temperatures. The May through July outlook is showing above normal temperatures with drier conditions, especially over the northern half of the region. So we will be watching that as it does develop, especially with a warmer, if we do see well above normal temperatures in the southwest, this would be what is needed for the monsoon to develop. So right now it's looking like those warmer conditions will develop, and we are looking for possibly an early start to the monsoon, which could bring some much needed precipitation to the far south going into June. But we'll continue to watch that as the monsoon certainly has not materialized over the last couple of years, so we'll continue to monitor that and the precipitation it may bring. So now putting everything together, our outlook for April, we are not showing any above normal areas. Again, this is typically when green up starts, so we should see somewhat of a decrease in some of our fire activity. However, prior to green up starting, if we do see windy conditions, certainly in dry areas, we could see, if there are fire starts, some fire spread for a burning period or two, which has been the case across parts of Utah over the last couple weeks. As we go into May, we are expecting those above normal conditions to develop more robust over the southern areas of the Great Basin, including the higher terrain of southern and eastern Nevada, and also the higher terrain of southern Utah and the Arizona Strip. So again, mostly targeting the higher terrain, as this is where our significant drought conditions typically produce more of our large fires. As we go into June, this area expands north, and then by July, it really encompasses much of the higher terrain of Utah and eastern and southern Nevada. The only exceptions might be over the southern areas of the Great Basin. If the monsoon develops as we anticipate this year, we could see a quick burst of lightning prior to the moisture arriving, which is really going to push our above normal in June. But by July, hopefully some of that moisture will make it in at least to the far south. But we'll certainly keep monitoring these trends for June and July and either expand or take away from these above normal areas as needed. That concludes our webcast for this month. Check back on May 1st for our next seasonal outlook.